The autumn breeze carried a crisp promise of change as Elizabeth and I strolled through the sprawling park, our Sunday routine. The leaves rustled underfoot, painting a mosaic of gold and amber across the paths. It was our attempt at normalcy, to spend quality time together amidst our busy lives, but the weight of recent unspoken tensions hung between us like a dense fog. As we rounded the central fountain, a familiar voice called out, "Lizzie." I turned to see a woman approaching, her smile bright and her pace quick. She was someone from Elizabeth's past, a college friend, if my memory served me right. "Cassandra! It's been ages." Elizabeth's surprise was genuine as they embraced, laughter mingling with the rustling leaves. Through the sprawling park, ours to share updates about her life, but her next word sliced through the afternoon calm like a cold blade. "So, how was your time at the Grand Oak Hotel last month? I heard it's lovely this time of year." I froze, a knot tightening in my stomach. The Grand Oak Hotel? We hadn't been anywhere last month, or so I thought. Elizabeth glanced at me, a flash of panic crossing her features before she masked it with a laugh. "Oh, it was a last-minute thing," she said, turning back to Cassandra. "Tell me more about your new job. You were moving to the city, right?" Cassandra nodded, but not before adding, "It's a shame about the mix-up at the hotel, though. I'd booked a room for a weekend getaway, but my partner couldn't make it. Luckily, I found someone to take over the reservation. I hope they enjoyed it as much as we would have." As Cassandra prattled on about her new life, I barely registered the words. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of Elizabeth's recent late nights and vague excuses. The smile I wore was a mask, shielding the turmoil within. The moment stretched taut as we made our polite goodbyes, with Cassandra hugging Elizabeth and promising to catch up soon. As we resumed our walk, the silence between us was deafening. I needed answers, but how could I confront her without revealing my suspicions? That evening, as Elizabeth showered, I powered up her laptop under the guise of checking emails. A flicker of guilt passed through me, quickly overshadowed by my need for the truth. Her inbox was open, and there it was, an email confirmation from the Grand Oak Hotel for a weekend stay, just as Cassandra mentioned. The name on the reservation wasn't mine. The revelation was a gut punch, a betrayal that winded me. My wife, the woman I trusted with my heart, had chosen another. The pain morphed quickly into a cold resolve. Elizabeth would have her secrets, but I would have my revenge. That night, I lay next to her, a plan forming in the shadows of my mind. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. Elizabeth's deception would be her undoing, and our paths, once so entwined, would diverge forever. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, my decision was clear. Our marriage was over, but first, I would ensure she felt the sting of her own treachery. The morning sun cast a soft glow through the windows, belying the storm brewing within our home. Elizabeth moved around the kitchen, humming a tune, oblivious to the seismic shift in my feelings towards her. I watched her for a moment, the familiarity of this scene now tainted with the bitterness of betrayal. "Liz, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She turned, her smile faltering slightly at the gravity in my tone. "Of course, what's on your mind?" "It's about the Grand Oak Hotel," I started, watching her closely. Her face went pale, a telltale sign that I had struck a nerve. "Oh, that? It was nothing, just a last-minute thing with some friends from work," she replied, her voice a little too casual. "Friends from work?" I echoed, my skepticism clear. Cassandra mentioned it was a romantic getaway that she couldn't attend. She said she transferred the reservation to a friend. Elizabeth's eyes darted away, a clear sign of her discomfort. It was a misunderstanding," she stammered. I stepped closer, my resolve hardening. "A misunderstanding? Elizabeth, are you having an affair?" The accusation hung heavily between us, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a deep breath, she met my gaze. "Yes," she confessed, her voice a whisper. "It's not what you think, though. It's more complicated than that." The confession sliced through me, yet it was the confirmation I needed. "Complicated?" How could you betray me like this? Elizabeth began to cry, her usual composure shattered. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I was confused, and I felt distant from you. He was there, and it felt right at the moment. I listened, each word she spoke fueling my anger. And that justifies your actions? Sneaking around, lying to me? She shook her head, wiping her tears. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry, truly. I don't expect you to forgive me. The room felt colder, the space between us widening. I can't be with someone I don't trust, Elizabeth. This is something I can't move past. Her sobs grew louder, but my decision was made. I would leave, but not before ensuring she realized the gravity of her deceit. I'll be moving out. We can discuss the details once we've both had some time to think. As I turned to leave the kitchen, she reached out, grabbing my arm. Please, can we try to work this out? I love you. I pulled away, my heart hardening against her pleas. You should have thought about that before. Leaving her crying in the kitchen, I went upstairs to pack a bag. The next few hours were a blur of activity. I contacted a lawyer to discuss my options and called a friend to find a place to stay temporarily. That night, as I sat in the unfamiliar room at my friend's house, my mind raced with plans for retribution. Elizabeth had ruined our marriage with her lies, now it was her turn to face the consequences. My revenge would be calculated and thorough. She would not only lose me but her comfortable life would be upended. As I plotted, the anger in me brewed, a silent promise to myself that this was only the beginning. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room where I sat with a notepad, outlining my plan. The betrayal still stung, but my focus had shifted toward executing a meticulous revenge that would dismantle the facade of Elizabeth's perfect life. I started with a call to a private investigator. I need comprehensive information, I explained, my voice a mix of determination and fatigue. Travel records, credit card statements, phone logs, the more details, the better. Understood, the investigator replied, his tone professional. I'll get everything you need. Discretion is my priority. As I hung up, my phone buzzed. It was Elizabeth. I stared at the screen, the urge to answer and confront her again was strong, but I silenced the call. This wasn't the time for emotions, it was the time for strategy. Later that day, I met with my lawyer, detailing the grounds for divorce. Infidelity is clear, I stated flatly. I want to ensure the settlement reflects her deception. We'll make a strong case, the lawyer assured me, tapping notes into her laptop. Especially with the evidence you're gathering. It will strengthen your position considerably. The next step involved social leverage. Elizabeth prided herself on her community standing, and I knew this was a vulnerable spot. I drafted an email to our mutual friends, a calculated message that hinted at troubling discoveries and personal upheavals, ensuring it would stir curiosity and concern. I hit send, feeling a twinge of satisfaction as I imagined the whispers starting. But the real turning point came 2 days later when the investigator provided the evidence I needed. Photos, detailed timelines, and receipts, irrefutable proof of Elizabeth's affair. I reviewed them late into the night, each piece a weight added to the scale of her betrayal. With the evidence in hand, I confronted Elizabeth one last time. We met in the quiet corner of a nearly empty cafe, her face pale, eyes wary. I know everything, Elizabeth, I began, sliding a folder across the table to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes widening with each document she reviewed. Where did you get this? She whispered, fear lacing her voice. I needed the truth, I replied coldly. Now, I'm using this to ensure our divorce reflects your deceit. She looked up, tears brimming. Is there any way we can avoid this going public? Think about what this will do to our families. The time for considering our families was before you lied and cheated, I said, my voice void of the warmth it once held for her. I'm moving forward with the divorce, and these documents will be part of the proceedings. I stood up, leaving her with the damning evidence. As I walked away, I felt a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The first steps of my revenge were in place, shaking the foundation of her life just as she had shattered mine. Back home, as I sat reviewing the next phases of my plan, the doorbell rang. An unexpected visitor? Curious, I opened the door to find Cassandra standing there, her expression somber. "I heard things are tough," she said. "Can we talk?" As I let her in, I wondered how this new variable might influence my carefully laid plans. Could Cassandra be an ally, or was she another complication in my quest for retribution? The layers of my revenge were unfolding, but the endgame was still unclear. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clock and the faint murmur of the city outside. Cassandra sat across from me, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and curiosity. I had always regarded her as merely Elizabeth's friend, a peripheral figure in our life. Now, she might hold a piece of this intricate puzzle. "I heard about the divorce," Cassandra began, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I also know about Elizabeth and I think there's something you should know." Her hesitation piqued my interest. "Go on," I urged, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. "It wasn't just a fling," she confessed. "The man Elizabeth was with, he's manipulating her. I think he's done this before, to other women." This revelation added a new layer of complexity to my plans. Not only had Elizabeth betrayed me, but she might also be a victim in a larger game. However, my resolve for retribution hadn't waned. "Do you have proof of this?" I asked. Cassandra nodded, pulling out her phone to show me messages and emails. The evidence was damning, painting a picture of a man who preyed on vulnerable women, seducing them for his gain. "I wanted you to know the whole truth," Cassandra said as she finished her explanation. "What you do with it, that's up to you." I thanked her, my mind racing with this new information. The deceit was deeper than I had imagined, and now, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Over the next few days, I laid the groundwork for the final act of my plan. With the evidence from Cassandra, I contacted the authorities and several women who had been similarly manipulated. Together, we built a case not just for a simple divorce, but for a criminal charge against the man who had orchestrated this deception. Elizabeth remained unaware of my knowledge of her manipulator. When the day of our final divorce hearing arrived, she looked tired and worn. As we stood before the judge, I watched her closely, seeing the woman I had once loved, now a stranger mired in her mistakes. Before the judge could finalize the proceedings, I spoke up. "Your Honor, there is more to this case than just a failing marriage. There is a pattern of manipulation and deceit that extends beyond personal mistakes." The courtroom fell silent as I outlined the evidence, revealing the extent of the betrayal and the manipulation by the man who had turned our lives upside down. Elizabeth's face drained of color as she realized the full scope of her entanglement. The judge ordered a recess, and in the chaos that followed, Elizabeth approached me. "I didn't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought it was real." I looked at her, the woman I had shared years of my life with, now broken and pleading. "You chose your path, Elizabeth. You could have chosen differently." The final judgment was harsh, but just. The manipulator was arrested, and our divorce was granted. Elizabeth was left to rebuild her life, but between us, there was nothing left to salvage. Our final goodbye was a silent nod in a crowded courtroom, a mutual recognition of the ruin that lay between us. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of the past months felt both heavier and lighter on my shoulders. Justice had been served, and retribution had been exact. But as I stepped into the sunlight, the future uncertain but free of deceit, I knew the path ahead was mine alone to shape.